Hello friends, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm in Luminar Neo and I am talking about 5 things, 5 ideas, 5 techniques, 5 things to think about that will help you improve your editing right now so that when the new year gets here, you'll be ready to go. Because if you're like me, I like to cross that threshold of a new year with some plans in mind, some improvement in mind, and things that I can do to get better. These 5 ideas will help you right now so that when the new year gets here, you're ready to go. The good news is, of course, that these ideas are timeless. So even if you're watching this video in 2026, it's still useful information that will get you to the next level. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got this photo here and I'm going to walk through and edit as I talk about these 5 different ideas. Now, the first idea is don't just start editing aimlessly. Have a vision and visualize your final result. Get something in mind. And you might think, well, I don't really know what I want to do. How do I get that in mind? Well, there's 2 ideas that I have for you. The first one is use presets. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use the preset on the photo, but they're really good as you hover over to give you some visibility into what a particular look could be. This is a great example because as I hover over this preset, which by the way, this preset collection is free for anyone that subscribes to my newsletter. If you want the presets plus my 27-page Luminar ebook, you can subscribe to my newsletter at the link below. You get this stuff and a few other things as well. But even if you don't use my presets, any preset will give you an idea. Just hover over it. And this particular preset, I think, looks pretty good. It's warmed up the sky, which I like. It's created that more mood, which I like. It's popped some of that green, which I like. However, I don't want to use the preset because it's a little too much, and I prefer to walk through and edit manually in this video. The point is, you have this as an idea as you hover over these presets to give you an idea of what some editing pathways are that you could take. Now, that's the first idea for helping you kind of visualize your end result. The second idea, I'm going to go over to the Edit tab. You can see I have a raw file here. I'm going to actually skip that for now. I'm not going to skip when I edit. But to get an idea, I use Accent AI, and I just go to 100. It will really pop the photo quite a bit. And you can see there's quite a bit of a difference before and after. It's brightened up the foreground. It's done a little bit of work around the sky and balanced out the light and things like that. So that's a good second way, in addition to presets, to give you some idea of what you can do to help you kind of visualize your final result. I'm going to reset all that, and what I want to do is actually go in and edit. So I'm back to my original. I've got Develop Raw here, but using presets just on hover, just to give you a visual, or Accent AI to 100 gives you a good idea. That will help you set your vision, because what you want is once you have your vision in place, you want to start aiming in that direction, which for me is going to be enhance the light, of course. I want to do some things in the foreground. I want to adjust the sky, and I want to warm the photo up, and I also want to end up with some mood. We're going to cover all that. So that's first, get a vision or visualize your final result. Now, step 2 is really beginning your edit the right way. And for me, that's 2 tools. That is Develop Raw and Super Contrast. You don't have to do it my way. It works for me on every single photo that I edit, and I do this 99 point whatever % of the time. And this is my approach. I like to go into Develop Raw. In this case, I want to lift the shadows because they're way too dark. Maybe put on the highlights a little bit. I like to hit the J key. Helps me visualize the light. I do see the spots. We'll get those in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pull the highlights down a little bit more. Maybe slightly lift the shadows and add a little bit of contrast. While I'm at it, I actually might give it a tiny bit of vibrance and maybe a tiny bit of sharpening. I don't want to do too much color. By the way, I'm going to hit J again to turn that off. I don't want to do too much color work here because we're going to cover color in a different one of these tips here. But that's giving me a nice starting point. And that's really all Develop Raw is for me, is getting me started. And Super Contrast is tool number 2, and that's really continues my kind of getting started. All you're doing is setting the stage for your edit so that you're ready to go. And again, I may turn on the J key here. There's a tiny bit of blown out spot in the sky. I can fix that pretty easily with with Super Contrast. And then I'm going to play a little bit with the midtones as well and the shadows. So a little bit of maneuvering there. I'm going to hit the J key. I think all that's fine. So before and after. And so far with these 2 tools, Develop Raw and Super Contrast, we've gone from there to there. So I've got a really good starting point for my edit. And that's why I think these 2 tools are the best way to begin the right way. And that sounds judgmental. It's not, there's no right or wrong. This is a photo edit. You should do whatever you want to do. But this idea and this approach works for me every time. So have a vision, and I showed you how to get there. Number 2, start the right way. And now we're going to jump into number 3. But first, I'm going to remove those spots from the sky. and then we'll jump into it. Okay, the third tip here in this approach is masking. It is all about local adjustments. The first two things that we did, develop raw and super contrast, those are essentially global adjustments. That's the setting the stage, and that's why I think that's so important. But once you've kind of set the stage, you need to start driving down towards that vision that you have. And for me, it's creating a particular color look, it's accentuating detail, it's doing a number of different things. Masking is the key skill to get you there. If you don't know how to do masking, or if you're not familiar with it, I've got countless videos here, so be sure and subscribe. I've also, in that free ebook you get by joining my newsletter, there's some tips. And of course, I have a masking masterclass available on my website. But it's a critically important skill in making sure that you can achieve the vision that you have. Because if you're not masking, you're basically applying any tool or filter across the entire photo, which doesn't really work. So in this case, I'm going to start with Structure AI. I'm going to go into masking. I'm going to get a linear gradient. And all I want to do is drag a little bit of that across the foreground. So the mask is 100% down here and it fades to 0 as it gets further into the photo. And all I'm doing is increasing the structure here. And that's just adding a little bit of crunch to those rocks in the foreground because I think it looks good, and because they're closer to us, I think you would expect to see more detail in them. Now the second thing I want to do here, and this is something I recommend doing a lot, is opening, develop, and using masks to adjust the light in different parts of the photo. Now in this case, I'm actually going to do a little bit of color work as well, and I'm going to do that in the sky. And for me, luminosity masking is my favorite mask. It's what I basically consider the best and most useful mask in not just in Luminar, but in any editing tool that has luminosity mask. But it just gives you so much control. And again, this will not be a full tutorial on that, but I am just setting up my luminosity mask to mostly cover the areas that I want it to cover. And I'm just kind of playing around with that as I talk to you. It's going to be something about like that. And what I want to do is start by adjusting the light. So for me, I want to pull down the highlights a little bit, maybe lift the shadows, maybe slightly lift the exposure, because I do want to brighten the sky because I'm also going to warm it up. And if it's warmer, I feel like it should be brighter. So far, I've done a little bit with the light thanks to the luminosity mask. It's really contained in those areas, so before and after. And what I want to do is add a little bit of warmth, so a little bit of temperature and a little bit of tint, just because I like a tint in my, this is a sunrise, but sunrise and sunset, I like to play with tint, and maybe a little bit of vibrance as well. Not a massive, massive color shift, but definitely a little bit brighter and a little bit warmer, so before and after. And now that I've done that, I'm going to close develop and open it again. So we're still on local adjustments, which is masking based. And in this case, I'm going to get a linear gradient, and I'm going to slightly darken the foreground here. And once I've done that, I'm going to come over here, slightly darken that. So I'm just kind of framing the photo, but I'm going to go back into masking. I'm going to get another linear gradient. You can stack them. And I'm going to drag that across the sky because I'm creating a little bit of a darkening up there, just kind of framing the photo. So if you look at the before and after, if you look at both the sky and the very bottom foreground, before and after, slightly frames the image. And yes, as you just saw, you can use that linear gradient twice, but on the same instance of develop. But note, because I'm in the same instance of develop, they're both getting the exact same number here on that exposure decrease. So sometimes you may need to do different numbers, which means opening develop a different time. Bottom line is, I've used masking to add some detail to the foreground, adjust the light in the sky along with the temperature, and then also create a little bit of framing around the image by slightly polarizing or darkening the sky and doing the same in the foreground. Now there's a lot of different masking tips, tricks, and ideas and things like that that you could use in a photo, and I won't use them all here. But that's the basic idea. I'm shaping the light, making some targeted color adjustments because I'm trying to set my photo on that path to the vision that I have, which is a little bit better adjustment to the light, nice pop in color, and adding some mood. And so, speaking of color, that's the fourth thing that we're going to be talking about, and that is color grading. Now for me, there are a lot of great tools in Luminar for adjusting color. There's color, which we're actually going to use here. There's color harmony, there's toning, there's landscape, which is specifically golden hour. There's a lot of different things that you can do in color and a lot of great tools. I'm going to use a couple of them here, and I'm going to start with color. But all I want to do is really set up the color grade for this image. And so I'm going to start with color. And what I want to do is, as you see the greens here, I can play with that green hue, and what I want to do is make it a little bit richer green. So it was a little bit on the yellow side. I'm going to create it, make it a little bit greener, and I'm also going to go into the luminance of that green and make it a little bit brighter. So I'm just creating a little bit of pop in that green. Now, I don't need to mask it. Sometimes you do, but I don't need to mask it this time because the green is only showing up in that foreground on the rocks. There's no green anywhere else in the image. If there were and you wanted it just in the rocks, you could use a linear gradient in the foreground for that. Now that I've done that, I'm also going to go into the saturation, and I'm going to pull that down slightly because it's a little too neon green. And I will also point out that whenever you're adjusting the greens, you may want to experiment with the yellows as well, because look at what, like if I pull down the yellow or increase the yellow, it's impacting those greens because there's a lot of yellow in the green. So keep that in mind when you're playing with the greens or yellows. They're really close to each other. So you may want to adjust both if you're trying to adjust what appears to be just one of them. So before and after, made it a little bit greener, made it a little bit brighter, and I took down the saturation because I don't want it to look like a nuclear neon kind of explosion there. Okay, now that I've done that, and continuing in my color grade, I'm going to go into color harmony. And here I'm going to do a little bit of brilliance and warmth, and this is going to be a global impact. It's going across the entire photo. I'm going to pull that brilliance down because it's really impacting those greens a lot. But I'm going to add a little bit of warmth. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth here. And so that is just helping me get that sky looking the way I want it to look. And then down here in color balance, I'm going to go into the shadows. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, which is just going to make it a tiny bit darker. And then that's in the shadows. And in the highlights, I'm going to add a little bit of red, which is going to make it a tiny bit brighter and a little bit warmer. So if you look at the overall impact of color harmony, before and after, before and after, I've adjusted the colors. I've done that warmth that I talked about and that I wanted to have, but it also slightly impacts contrast if you take a look at it, especially in the foreground, before and after. The reason why is because down here in shadows, I went to the blue in the shadows. So that's a little bit darker. So that takes the blue in the shadows, makes them darker, and that creates a little bit more contrast because they're surrounded by things that are brighter. So it just increases that contrast before and after. I think my color grade is looking really good. Now, the thing is, don't overdo it with color grading. Don't use too many tools. I used 2 here, but notice that within color harmony, I used 3 of those. That's kind of like 3 tools plus the color tool for the greens on the rocks. So that's kind of like 4 tools, which is a lot. So I recommend being gentle and careful, not using too many, because as you stack them, it starts to become a bit intense. And always just look at the overall image. And it never hurts to just walk away, take a break from your image, and come back to it later with fresh eyes so that you're not just desensitized to the amount of color that you have. Now, the 5th thing in this approach, the 5th technique, is what I consider finishing adjustments. These are usually global in nature, meaning they apply to the entire photo, which means no masking, but sometimes they can be masked. It just depends. But usually this is where I'm setting the mood, kind of finalizing the mood. And as I said a moment ago, it doesn't hurt to do these kind of things, walk away and come back later. Like later that day, even just a 10-15 minute break can help. But what I want to do here is I'm going to go into the glow tool because I like that look of a little bit of moodiness. And I'm going to go in and get Orton, and I'm going to go pretty low. I mean, not that much. I don't want to overdo it. But if you look at the before and after slightly brightens the sky, which I did earlier with Develop and a luminosity mask. But it looks nice, I think. So before and after, slight little mood enhancement. I'm going to go into mystical, and sometimes I mask mystical. I will not be doing that here. I'm just going to apply that globally. So across the entire photo. But again, it accentuates that mood. So before and after, it kind of softens things up, adds a little bit of contrast. And then I'm going to come in and get a vignette. And the vignette for me is a nice finishing touch and something that I almost always do last. I prefer a little bit of a rounder vignette, and my feathering, I prefer to go to 100. And I'm going to go ahead and lift that inner light, which defaults to the very center of the photo. But if you want to move it around, you can do that, right? And move it to different parts of the photo. I don't. I'm just going to put it back in the center because that's where I need the vignette to be focused. And that's also where the inner light is going to focus. So I'm just slightly brightening that up a little bit. So before and after, before and after. And that's how you're able to go from that photo to that photo using these 5 different ideas. Get a vision, essentially, visualize your end result. Do your global edits first, which is like setting the stage, kind of starting the right way. Use the different masking tools to achieve your local targeted adjustments, specifically around the light, but also sometimes with color and detail. Use the right tools for color grading and just be careful that you don't overdo it. And of course, the finishing touches, which is finalizing the mood and getting you to that end result before and after. That's how this one went. And those are 5 ideas, techniques, things that you can implement in your own editing to improve it right away so that when the new year gets here, you're ready to go. And like I said, these are timeless techniques and they just help you get better edits regardless of where you are in your editing journey. I hope it helps, my friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be back really soon with more videos. You guys take care, and until next time, adios.